Buongiorno everybody, Pinstripe here and welcome back to more IL-2. Tonight we're flying in the Maki C.202, C.202 to be exact, as this is an Italian fighter that was predominantly used and saw a lot of action in North Africa. But in this first clip we're coming up against two Hurricanes who are much more quick, much more nimble, and are going to pose quite the challenge, bearing in mind as well, as you can see on screen, there is enemy flak flying up at me, but I'm just quite happy to ignore that. So getting a few little hits onto the first Hurricane as he starts leaking that precious gasoline, but just taking note of the location of the flak guns underneath so as not to fly directly over them to become easy targets. But initially in these first few clips there's going to be a few flybys, as you'd expect, very close to the windshield, but neither side managing to get any hits, so we go again. As you'd expect in these kinds of dogfights, I do not want to be sandwiched in between these two Hurricanes. The main aim here, of course, is to damage one so that he limps off, and then that will open the door and provide a bit of breathing space to then target the other guy. We are bringing some decent firepower in two 12.7mm machine guns in the engine cowling, and then two 7.7mm in either of the wings. So we're not too bad on that front. And we are slowly creeping up and getting closer, ever so slowly, just getting the smallest of hits in, but it is slowly factoring into what the next decisions will be for these Hurricanes. Because if enough damage is inflicted, then like I say, that will then open the door for us to part ways with one and deal with the other. Now the Macchi actually had quite a bit of trouble in that it was quite prone to going into an uncontrollable spin. Thankfully I don't suffer from it too much in this first clip, but in the second that might come about. Thankfully not uncontrollably though. But as you can see, we just managed to get some good hits on that Hurricane, so he is limping away, and now we can focus down his wingman as we kind of follow him into a climb, which is really not great. As you can see from my plane's energy, I am just not in the best state to be climbing and following. But we go into a dive, and this is where he then puts himself in the firing line because he is climbing rapidly, losing energy, and I'm feeling frisky from a distance. So we're going to put those machine guns to the test. I've got my aim going. I am nice and chill. There's no bouncing around when I'm trying to aim, and we do indeed take him down. But in doing so, I've completely forgotten about the location of his wingman. And yeah, it does not go so smoothly as I try and turn on the inside. I've lost sight of him, but by this point it is too late. So I am a little bit injured. My plane, or at least the engine, is on fire, but it is not unsalvageable. As we'll see from the replay, I chased him as I got a little bit of a hit on his wing. This was the Hurricane that went down, by the way. He then dives into a spin, which is fine by me because I'm slowly making my way down. I've got my eyes on him. There's no trouble there. And then when he comes down and lifts himself into a climb, he loses that speed so I can gain on him. But you'll notice his wingman in the background just slowly approaching me from behind. So I have managed to sandwich myself in between the two Hurricanes. As I said, I didn't want to, but we do take one of them down at least before it then ends up being game over for me, because as I then go into that turn, I get a few hits. And then when I lose sight of him, I try and turn on the inside, but he is already there to inflict just enough damage onto my engine to take me down. Armor wasn't really one of the main benefits of this plane. The 202 armor-wise was not so great, but thankfully for us, we are not in pieces, and we can at least come in for a landing on the beach, as I would normally do. It seems whenever we're by the coast, I just immediately go for the beach. When I need to go for a crash landing and there's no airfield nearby, it's got to be done. So as we come in for a crash landing, I guess we've got a bit of time to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, North Africa. Now this is where the Macchi kind of shone the most, because it was the one model of plane that was flown by almost all of the Italian aces. And in fact, during, I think it was mid-1942, it had a better kill ratio than the Bf-109, which is quite an achievement. In fact, it was actually quoted as being one of the best and most undervalued of fighters in the war. And that is coming from one of the Australian aces, Clive Caldwell. So yeah, interesting notes there. But anyway, we're going to be starting this second clip as we're going to tone it down a bit. Change skins, of course, because it wouldn't be an Italian plane without some kind of flamboyant skin. But either way, we're going to be coming up against a Spitfire flown by a hardcore Russian man who is going to be coming and gunning for us in his Spitfire. But these two are kind of on equal pairing, because this is where the surprise came for me. This was actually the first time I was using the 202 and kind of putting it through its paces. When it comes to a more acrobatic dogfight, it was very strong. Of course, speed-wise, not so good, but in keeping up and keeping the same movements, I guess, as the Spitfire, it was enjoyable to use and very versatile. But I did notice when I was pushing it a little bit too far, and you'll see it as this video goes on, yeah, those uncontrollable spins can be a bit of an issue. I think one of the things for me personally that I need to get out of the habit of is blindly chasing planes that are clearly looking to climb and then dive. Like if I'm chasing them kind of panel for panel, then it's not so good, because you lose all that energy. And as you can see, I am in the worst spot, having virtually no speed compared to the Spitfire, who is zooming around, actually looking to get some hits on me. I think he might have clipped me a little bit there, just looking at the replay, getting some nice acrobatic spins. We're actually in a little bit of a weave, coming back and forth in between each other. So yeah, he does maybe strike my canopy a little bit, but there's no crazy damage. But that spinning is going to continue, and again, the acrobatics are very much in full swing. But it's all a case, as always, of keeping eyes locked on where your target is going, trying to predict where they're going to go, and matching that where necessary. But here, as he comes out of a cloud, I look to turn to the right, and this is where the spin comes in. Very frustrating, very annoying, because it was just going to be a simple right-hand turn, and I end up having to dive down to gain a bit of speed. He is already above me, so I'm keeping an eye on him in the clouds there, but I know that I'm not going to catch him. There's no point trying to climb. I just need to wait for him to come down effectively as we go into a little bit of a loop. He then returns back up once more, and that is actually going to be where his downfall lies. That constant up-down motion, I'm going to be waiting for that point where he reaches the peak and then trying to strike. But for now, just going to keep on his tail, keep kind of matching his movements, and hoping that the Macchi is kind on me and doesn't spin out no more, because when that does happen, you're left with virtually nothing. You've got no speed. You're in a spin. If you can control it, that's great, but if your opponent is still on you, then it's more than likely going to be game over. But again, I'm gaining a little bit of speed, maintaining the chase here as he then goes into another dive, but again, pushing it that little bit too far. But this is exactly what I'm talking about with just blindly trying to climb and follow my opponent when I have no energy. You can see here that I'm basically fighting against my own plane, and the shots that I take here are more in frustration out of anything, because it's just like, God damn you, I cannot reach you. How can you do this to me? But I am remaining on his tail, bearing in mind that he is still pushing forward after that dive. So I'm going to gather some speed and use that to my advantage, as I know what his next move is going to be. He is going to maneuver himself back into a climb, again despite my very wonky shots, attempting to get some damage onto him. But this is where it ends up being a victory for me, because at the very peak of his climb, I get a few hits on him, and the pilot just immediately bails. So maybe I hit something important, maybe he just couldn't be bothered to fly anymore, maybe he was running out of gas, who knows. But either way, we come away with a victory for the very first time. The first time flying this plane, the first victory with it, and potentially the only one. Because as much as I enjoyed it, maybe I just need to fly it some more. Maybe I need to utilize it a bit more. But seeing the replay, you'll see just the smallest amount of hits onto the Spitfire was enough for the pilot to call it a day. Maybe he just wasn't feeling confident, but regardless of the reasoning, the outcome is still the same, and we come away with the victory. So overall, this plane has been a somewhat pleasant surprise. Out of 10, I'd probably give it like a 6.8, bordering on a 7. It's got some areas it needs to work on. Of course, the armament is little to non-existent, and it is, to me anyway, very reminiscent of Japanese planes in that low amount of armor. The armament is decent in the guns that you have, but it just requires you to get up close and personal and use that maneuverability to your advantage. And the whole spin out thing is again very reminiscent of Japanese planes in that that is going to be a major issue that you need to keep an eye on. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Plenty more IL-2 content to come in future. Again, if you've got a specific plane that you want me to try out, let me know, and I'll catch you all later for the next one.